Steve be right here, man. 255 AD in the chat is like, where be Steve? I'm right here. A couple minutes late. All good. No worries. Hi, everybody. Glad everybody could make it. Hope everybody who celebrated Thanksgiving yesterday had a good one. I did. So let's get started. As always, I will be turning to questions submitted ahead of time by my Patreon patrons and my channel members. And once I get through all of those, I will turn to the live chat. We'll spend the rest of the show hanging out together in the live chat. So let's get started with the first of my patron and member questions. And this first one is from Black Cover 95, who says, continuing from Ask Away number 97, you said you wouldn't have Darkseid in your version of the DCU because, quote, Superman's not an astronaut. I was actually asking about him in terms of being an alien invader. How does a Justice League not as powerful deal with such a threat? If inherently powerful beings like Darkseid don't fit, what about beings like Mxyzptlk or Batmite, or are they too goofy? Oh, well, no, I mean, not for me. Mixie is one of my favorite Superman villains. So, I mean, he's not, like, as a Star Trek fan, I connect him to Q. Like, in my mind, Mr. Mxyzptlk is like Superman's Q. Although I guess I should say that Q is actually Star Trek's Mr. Mxyzptlk because Mixie came first. No, he's certainly not too goofy for my taste. Nor is Batmite, by the way. I think in the right context, both of those characters can be a lot of fun and can work terrifically. And the thing is, you know, the way I look at it is, if I came up with what I thought was a really great, like you mentioned the Justice League. If I came up with what I thought was a really great idea for a Justice League story that involved maybe not necessarily Darkseid, but some kind of alien invasion or some kind of big threat, then the Justice League would be as powerful as they need to be to defeat the threat, you know, at the end of the story. Like, that's kind of just the way it works. And actually that's, you know, that's how Superman got to be so overpowered in the Silver Age to begin with, was they kept sort of upping the stakes. And in order to defeat this bad guy and then this bad guy and then this bad guy, Superman had to keep getting a little stronger and a little faster and a little more resilient. And eventually he was like this godlike figure. That's just kind of the way it works. And I don't really have a huge problem with that. Like, to me, the story is first and foremost. The story is the first and primary master to be served. And if I came up with what I thought was a great idea for a story, then I would try to write it so that the threat could be satisfyingly resolved using the abilities that I had already established for the various Justice League members. And if I couldn't get there, then I would come up with, you know, I would maybe nudge their power level up a little bit if I felt like that would make for a better story. So yeah, that kind of stuff doesn't really bother me. And I don't put a lot of thought into it ahead of time. You know, I proceed from the story and the premise, and then I do what needs to be done to tell that story the best way that I can. Jay Sutton, borrowing another of Dad's question credits for this one. Well, let's not make this a habit. I don't care. Now, I may only be several weeks old, but even I know that the number 100 is pretty special, such as, say, the 100th Ask Away that's coming up in a few weeks. I don't know if you have anything planned for it, but if not, I have an idea. Answer away. You ask the question using the usual form, and your viewers answer in the standard 1,000-character format, to which you then comment respond, as do the live viewers, as if they need prompting. Here's an example question you can ask. Use or reject at your pleasure. What creative contribution would you add to a Star Trek? Could be anything: an episode, a movie, a series, a character, villain of the week, a tweak, design ideas, anything. Pitch your ideas and let's discuss. It would be a nice way for people to share their ideas, the ones that otherwise never would have been heard. In terms of effort, it would be your absolute nadir. One below a not actually Trek actually comment response, but maybe fun. I do not have any specific ideas for Ask Away 100. So that, I mean, that's your suggestion there is as good of an idea as I have come up with. So I'm not saying I'm going to do that. I don't want to get your hopes up or you know, promise that I'm going to do that. And then, you know, it'll roll around to asking for questions for number 100, and you'll see it, and you'll be disappointed because I didn't do it. But that is a good idea. I will take that under consideration. That is a good idea. But as for what the question, maybe I could present like a slate of questions and sort of looking at different things or touching on different subjects. Because not everybody who watches my stuff is like a huge Star Trek fan. I know that's hard to believe, but not everybody who is a fan of mine is here primarily for the Star Trek stuff. So I wouldn't want it to be just like one Star Trek related question, because maybe not everybody would be able to get into that. But I guess I could post like a slate of questions and say, respond to one of these, or respond to, as many as you can fit into the 1,000-character limit. If you think you can get 1,000 characters and respond in some meaningful way to all of them, then go for it. If not, just pick one and we'll talk about it. But that's actually a neat idea. I don't know. I'll think about that. No promises, but I'll think about that. That's a really good idea. Such a sharp kid, for an infant. You're doing well. You're doing well so far. Stephen G. Clenard. Steve, you're a DC Comics guy. Maybe you can help me with some questions that have been vexing me for some time. It's Thanksgiving and time for the annual Super Friendsgiving potluck dinner. What dish does Batman bring, and does he make it himself, or does he have Alfred do it? Which hero makes the most popular dish, and which one brings that terrible Jell-O and marshmallow salad dessert? Speaking of which, do you think this would make a good premise for a forgotten Golden Age sidekick? Offensively stereotyped Native American man, the noble savage, who appeared with his pal, the powerful puritanical pilgrim man, bringer of freedom and civilization, as a regular feature in whitewashed American history comics. The Thanksgiving twosome enjoyed widespread popularity until the company was sued by the creators of The Lone Ranger. Whitewashed American history press agreed to cancel the comics and turned its focus on the burgeoning textbook market. Thoughts? That, as I often say in response to your proposals, that's fantastic, and I have no notes. That's hilarious. I love that. I love everything about that. The puritanical pilgrim man, it actually reminds me, if I can self-promote for a second, God knows I would never dream of doing that, but just for a second. Jason and I did a special podcast for Thanksgiving that we put up yesterday. That was another spooky business special where we play our characters from the Halloween episodes of Late Seating, where Jason is like the vampire character and I'm his enthralled manservant, kind of like his Igor, and so we did a Thanksgiving themed one of those, which I actually wrote, but one of the best bits in it was not something that I came up with. Actually, I wrote what is in the episode, but the idea came from Jason. He said, because the plot has to do with Jason's character creating like an unholy creature. And Jason says, I want there to be a joke where last year he created another unholy creature, and it was called the Ultimate Pilgrim. And it was like a Frankenstein monster, but made from the bodies of pilgrims. And instead of going around the village and killing people, it just passed moral judgment on others. And I thought that was tremendous. So, of course, I wrote that into the story. And that puritanical pilgrim man just brought that to my mind. But yeah, that whole thing is great. That whole thing is great. And, of course, Alfred would make whatever dish Batman brings. What would Batman bring? Maybe... maybe Alfred would insist on cooking the turkey, because just as a matter of pride, he would say, like, if you're going to have turkey at a Thanksgiving dinner, just please let me do it so that way I'll know that it's good and I won't have to worry about people eating substandard turkey on Thanksgiving, right? So Alfred would make the turkey and Batman would bring it. But of course Alfred would make it. Again, you're reminding me of things. One of my favorite joke from the Harley Quinn animated series is when Robin is upset and Batman tries to cheer him up by bringing him a grilled cheese sandwich with the Robin R symbol burned into the top. And he says, I made your favorite, grilled cheese. And Robin looks at it and kind of sulks. And he says, you didn't make that. Alfred made that. And Batman pauses for a second and then says, but I made him make it. So, and who brings the Jell-O marshmallow thing? Someone who doesn't want to get invited next year. Maybe Booster Gold, because he's kind of a dick. Maybe Booster Gold brings brings the Jello marshmallow thing. The what's it called? Um, Ambrosia. Why give something that gross, that beautiful of a name? That's ambrosia to you, the marshmallow Jello thing? Okay. Yeah, Booster Gold would bring ambrosia, and he would say, "But it's all the rage in the future," or something. Sludge Vohall, alias the First. This Deep Space Nine show. It's nothing like Star Trek. I hate that there's so much character development. The multi-season arcs are so confusing. What is this, some kind of daytime soap? Too many sex. Sincerely, Anus P. Fuckbuckle. And honestly, for those of you who are old enough to remember, you don't need me to tell you this, but for those of you youngins who don't quite remember how Deep Space Nine was received when it debuted in 1993, that's actually not such an exaggeration. Like, there were people, if you think that the people who reject Discovery and the sort of the current generation of shows as being, not legitimate Star Trek, have silly reasons for that now, there was I don't know, they weren't a very large segment of the fan base, but they were a very loud segment of the fan base in the sort of early years, the pre-World Wide Web years of the internet, when it was basically just like forums, just like Usenet groups and stuff, who would post about Deep Space Nine, and of course would write letters to newsletters and to fan magazines and stuff like that, and would communicate that way. But they were very upset because Deep Space Nine couldn't be a real Star Trek show. Star Trek takes place on a ship, not a space station. And this was an act, what a certain percentage of the fan base actually considered a legitimate argument. But it's on a space station. Star Trek's on a ship. Good for you. That's the level of textual analysis you're comfortable with, I see. So yeah, that's hilarious, and it's right on the nose. It's not, that is not even that much of an exaggeration. And as you can see, things have not really changed all that much. Agent Meister in Ireland, Peldor Joy. Steve, I'm on vacation in Greece and haven't had much time to come up with profound, thought-provoking questions, so I've scraped the bottom of the geekdom barrel and would like to know what your favorite warp core in all of Trek is. It can be from any series or movie, Federation or Alien. For what it's worth, my favorite warp core is the one seen in Voyager, which is also the one they used in the motion picture, I believe. I'm no expert in warp technology. I'm no expert in anything, except maybe taking longer to count the number of gray hairs on my head each month. But I think if they ever get around to making a real-life warp core, it would look like Voyager's. Also, many thanks for your recent Batman 66 video. I really enjoyed it. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I really liked making that video. I love Batman 66, so it was a pleasure to make that video, and I'm glad that you liked it and that other people have enjoyed it too. My favorite warp core, probably TNG, just because TNG was the first time that I sort of became aware of that where I became aware of engineering as a significant setting. Because we saw main engineering on classic Trek, and we even saw the warp core a little bit, and it was like a horizontal warp core instead of a vertical warp core. But you saw it. It wasn't really shot as though it was anything important, and you didn't really get any sense of it being like a significant thing. But it was there, and engineering was there as a location, although it wasn't that super significant of one. And then in the movies, there's some engineering stuff in motion picture, and of course in Wrath of Khan when Spock has his big death scene in engineering. So engineering is an important setting occasionally in the movies, but it's not really until TNG that main engineering becomes like an important recurring location that we go to a lot, that we at least get a glimpse of in almost every episode, it feels like. And what's the main feature of engineering? It's that big ass vertical warp core going up and down, with the sort of, the main part, the intermix chamber, right there in the background, and almost all those engineering shots. So yeah, I mean, TNG's warp core is probably my favorite one if I have to pick one. I don't really have a strong preference either way, but if I have to pick one, it's probably TNG, because that was the first one that I sort of noticed and got me to think of it as being like a thing, as a part of the show. Like, oh, that's the Warp Core. I recognize that, you know? So yeah, I'll go with the TNG Warp Core. Sangel says, I've enjoyed your content for a while, but just recently watched the Steve and Stuffy series. I thought it was really well done, and I liked it a lot. When you started S&T, I guess that's supposed to be S&S, did you have an outline of where you wanted to take the show, and did you stick to it? What did that series teach you on a personal level or skill level, writing or production? Thanks for your passion and thoughtfulness that really comes through in everything you do. Well, I really appreciate that. Thank you for saying that, and thank you for being a supporter. I did not have an outline of where I wanted to take the show. When Steve and Stuffy began, there was no plan for any kind of ongoing story. Actually, I didn't start doing ongoing stories in the Stuffy videos until probably, I think, the third or the fourth season was when I started doing, when I started thinking to myself, I want there to be like a story arc to this. And so when I started doing that, I would plot out a season at a time. And that was usually the first step of writing a season of Stuffy, where I would plot out, I would figure out how many episodes I wanted to do and when those episodes would go up on YouTube. I would fix dates to everything and figure out what the schedule would be and how many episodes I had and when they were coming out. And then I would go through and start plugging in ideas for episodes, like concepts for each episode, and start building and figure out what I wanted the overarching story of that season to be. And, what I wanted the big beats of it to be and where they would go, what episode this would happen, and et cetera, et cetera. So I would plan it out as a season. And I usually stuck more or less to that. Like there were a couple of times where I might have changed things a little bit, where I had to move things around, or I'd have something happen a little bit later or a little bit sooner, or I would change an ending or change the direction a little bit. But for the most part, I stuck to it. And I found that for Steve and Stuffy, that was a good way to write it, to make it up as I go along, but to make it up as I go along one season at a time. So there was no like multi-season idea for Steve and Stuffy ever. It was each season was sort of viewed as its own thing, and they were all interconnected, and they all took place in the same continuity, and one would build on the other and build on, the last one, et cetera, et cetera. But there was no pre-planning for how the seasons would go. And that's how we're doing. I mentioned a couple times with the new Stuffy series, which will be called Stuffy and Friends. Dana and I are writing that now, and we're using basically the same process that I used, that I just described to you. It's just that there's two of us writing, and Dana is doing most of the actual episode writing, but we're plotting it together, and we have the what will eventually be the entire season plotted out, just sort of very generally, this episode, this happens, this episode, this happens. So we know where we're going and what we need to accomplish in each individual episode. But it's just, and I think, and we've talked sort of vaguely about what we want to do for the season after this, but nothing specific, nothing nailed down, and nothing that we can't change. I mean, we haven't even finished writing this season yet, so we have plenty of room to fix things or change things or go in a completely different direction. But it's the same basic process of make it up as you go along, but do it on the season level as opposed to multi-seasons or things like that. So that seems to work for me as far as writing the Stuffy videos. I mean, what did it teach me? It taught me about acting, having to not just portray the various voices of the animals that I do, but portraying myself on screen, or the Steve and Stuffy version of myself, who is hopefully usually a little bit more of a dipshit than I am in real life. I'm usually a little sharper than I am in the Stuffy videos. And just, learning how to act more or less realistically, or act in a way so that it reads in the scene, so that it plays naturally. Cause I'm not actually talking to anybody. Like when I'm interacting with the animal characters in the show, I'm just doing scenes to nothing. I'm looking in the direction that I know I'm going to put in the shot of Stuffy or Jack or whoever. But I'm looking in that direction, but I'm not, there's nothing there. Like I'm pretending. And that, that was a skill that I developed and got pretty good at. Writing definitely writing stories, writing individual episodes that stand on their own, but also fit within a larger story arc for that season. And production, sure, lighting, shot composition, editing. Stuffy videos have totally made me a better editor because you have to construct scenes. The scenes have to have narrative flow. It's not just like you're doing a YouTube video where I'm sitting here talking to a camera and then I'm going to drop in some graphics and then cut back to me and then cut back to graphics. And, I mean, that takes a skill all its own, but it's different from when you're building a scene in a dramatic narrative form, where even though Stephen Stuffy is a comedy, like you still need to have a cohesive dramatic structure there. And it needs to feel like these are characters that are real and are actually talking to each other and actually inhabiting a space in real time. And, that all has to be constructed. And learning how to do that and figuring out that I could do that was really thrilling. And that was definitely something that the Stuffy videos taught me. And something that I look forward to getting back to and doing with them again. So yeah, I'm really glad you enjoy the Stuffy videos. They're my babies. They're my favorites. They've never been the most popular videos on the channel by far, but they have always been my favorites. Madeline Poirier. I bet I nailed that last name pronunciation, didn't I? I bet I just crushed it. What would be a better show, DS9 with the command staff of B5 or B5 with the command staff of DS9? I'm torn because I feel like Cisco telling Londo and Jakar to shut the fuck up would be hilarious, but I also feel like Garibaldi and Quark would be really fun too. Still kind of surprised there's no Quark-type character on B5. Also, who do you think is the most formidable enemy? The Shadows, the Borg, or the Dominion? And then Madeline also cheated a little bit and asked a second question, but it's the holidays, so I'm feeling generous. So I will answer Madeline's second question here right after this one. But that's cheating. Just don't make a habit of it. I kind of think I would rather see the Deep Space Nine command staff on Babylon 5 because Babylon 5 is sort of a more open world. There are fewer pre-established rules than there are in Star Trek, which had, decades of history built up already by the time Deep Space Nine came along. So the crew of Deep Space Nine could, pretty much do whatever the fuck they wanted. And can you imagine Quark in a universe? Well, I guess Quark's not the command staff, so he wouldn't be there. But, Cisco could be even more of a maverick than he was as the commander of Deep Space Nine. And yeah, the interactions between, think about like Kira and Jakar could have a lot to talk about. They come from similar backgrounds, So I think I would go with the DS9 command staff on B5, just for how they would exist in that world, in addition to like character interactions and stuff, which I think would be a lot of fun. And they're kind of, in the first season of B5, there kind of was a Quark type character. There was, I forget his name now, but like the giant insect guy who was kind of like the leader of the underworld on the station. I forget his name, but they dropped him after the first season. He wasn't exactly like Quark. He wasn't as funny as Quark. And Quark isn't like a crime kingpin. He's more like a lower level guy, kind of a middleman, but still it's a similar vibe. And so he was sort of a Quark-ish character, but they wrote him out after the first season. Second question from Madeline says, okay, I realize I'm breaking the rules by submitting this, so feel free to ignore it. But like, do you think Delenn has ever shouted out in Valen's name while in bed with Sheridan, but then it's just kind of weird for him because she's yelling out the name of a guy from work? Or do you think it would be sacrilege for her to yell Valen's name during sex? Well, it would be sacrilege, but she would still do it because that's, that's what's hot about it. That's why she would do it, because it's forbidden. You know what I mean? And yeah, I think that would be a great subject for one of Babylon 5's patented wacky sitcom comedy bits. Because one of the things I noticed when I rewatched it several months ago that I had forgotten about, because I rewatched it on HBO Max not too long ago, and before that I had not watched it at all since it was originally on in the 90s, so I had forgotten a lot of stuff. And one of the things I had forgotten about Babylon 5 was what a corny, like, sitcom sense of humor it could have sometimes. Like, not always, but sometimes it was totally like a sitcom. Like the bit where Ivanova had to, there was an alien ambassador who wanted to fuck Ivanova, but he had no idea what Earth mating rituals were like. So Ivanova just like made up this completely like sanitary, touch-free, fully clothed version of human sex and did that with him, where she basically just danced around and shouted nonsense and then was like, oh, was that good for you? And convinced the alien that that's what sex was for humans, so he would be satisfied and leave her alone. That's like, I mean, that's like sitcom shit. Right? That's like bad sitcom shit. But Babylon 5 would do that. It had this really like weird, cheesy sense of humor. And I feel like Delenn yelling out in Valen's name and then, sort of like the pillow talk afterwards between her and Sheridan would be an opportunity for something like that. So I would I would be interested to see that scene. Ehel, hi again. Thanks for all your cool content. My question today, have you seen, heard of Humans, the UK sci-fi show? And if so, what are your thoughts about it? Simple question. And unfortunately, simple answer. No, I have heard of it, but I've never seen it. So I can't tell you my thoughts on it because I have none. So I apologize for not being able to answer your question in any kind of meaningful way. But thank you for the question and thank you for your support. And hopefully if you ask a question next time, I'll be able to give a more satisfying answer. Kier, creature of habit and avoider of change. I saw a careers advisor this week to try and get back to a workplace after 12 years raising my daughter. My level of anxiety was about 1 million and I was almost sick before going in. I did, though, because the only thing I had to lose was the anxiety about facing an uncertain future. What has been your biggest leap of faith or time you've overcome a self-imposed hurdle? As always, keep up the good work, good and otherwise. Keep up the work, good and otherwise. Going back to college was probably a big one. I've mentioned this before. From age 20 to about age 25, I worked full time. And in a not very well-paying job. I was maintenance staff at a truck stop. And that was a good job in many ways, but it was also a terrible job in many ways. And one of the ways it was not such a good job was I didn't make very much money doing it. So I decided to go back to college, which I was able to do because I had a standing offer from my grandparents to pay for it for me. So I wouldn't even have to take out student loans because they had set aside a college fund for myself and my brother because my pap worked on the railroad for 30 years during an era where there was such a thing as the middle class in this country, and a working stiff could get a good enough job that if they worked there for a couple decades, they would not only get an amazing retirement, but they would also make enough that they could afford to set aside thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to send their kids or grandkids to college. So that's I and my brother as well. We both benefited from that. He didn't go to academic college, but he went to trade school and became a mechanic, and makes a hell of a lot more money now than I do. And because of Pap and Granny's ability to finance it, But yeah, going back to college at age 25, after I'd been working for 5 years, that there was some anxiety involved in that, having to apply for school when you're halfway through your 20s, when most people who are doing that same thing are 17 or 18, about to get out of high school or fresh out of high school. I was a little anxious about that. Deciding that after college was over, deciding that I didn't, that I wanted to try to do YouTube as a full-time career. That was a little, that was anxious for me and for my wife at the time, because we were both involved in that. But it turned out okay. At least the YouTube part of it did. Yeah, I think those are probably the two biggest examples of having to overcome like an obstacle or a self-imposed hurdle or facing something that gave me a lot of anxiety or could have gone, very wrong that fortunately didn't. John Burns, hydrate. Thank you, John, for the reminder. Hey, I hope your weekend goes well. I was thinking about food production and how it can change societies. Kill an animal and you can feed, but grow a farm and your society will change in a number of unexpected ways. I doubt those in the Middle East or China expected that agriculture would change their societies as much as they did. In North America, there weren't farms and food was precious. But with fewer groups of people were also very precious as well. I doubt an undersized child would be left in a cave to die like in ancient Sparta. This culture could have been communal in nature and inspired Chief Seattle's letter to the President of the U.S., Franklin Pierce, which included this: how can you buy or sell the sky? A concept that a communal society would find bizarre, but a hierarchical one probably wouldn't. Farming allowed for a much higher population, but also a class system. So can humanity go back? And in a democratic society with our history, how? I mean, can we go back to the kind of society that existed before agriculture? No, I don't think we can. Can we construct a society that is maybe less rigidly hierarchical, or is still hierarchical but is not nearly as hard on the people in the lower levels of the hierarchy? Yeah, I think we can, and I think we should. And there are a couple of relatively simple things that we could be doing now if there was enough political will, that would be making things, that would be improving things and increasing equity across the various levels, or at least increasing quality of life, that we just aren't doing, which is frustrating. So I don't think the question should be, can we go back? I don't think we should want to go back. I don't think we should want to go back to a pre-agricultural society or try to remake some older form of how things used to be done. I think we should be trying to find ways to make the world that we have now, the community that we have now, the society that we have now, as just and as fair as possible, and as hospitable as possible for people up and down the pyramid, no matter whether they are, the poorest among us, or whether they are rich in wealth and resources. And like I say, there are ways that we can do that, that we just aren't too serious about doing at the moment, unfortunately. And it's not just because we're a democratic society and everybody would have to vote to, let's go back and do things the way they were, a few thousand years ago before we had farms, which I don't think would ever happen. It's also, I just don't think that would be a very good idea. I think there's the fundamentals of society, in terms of, not of being an agricultural society, or, not being a hunter-gatherer society, I think are fine. It's just, distribution of wealth, distribution of resources, distribution of power that is the big problem to me. Wackfordina Squeers. As this is a YouTube-related question, I had considered submitting it to your Ask a Professional YouTuber series. However, the disparaging, and might I add, unprofessional way that you treat such inquiries made me doubt the efficacy of such a course of action. There is also a worrisome focus on your relationship with your mother. Psychiatric treatment might yet save you from complete breakdown. Additionally, your Ask Away series provides an example. I know someone with a YouTube channel. While I, of course, have better things to do with my time, I do know some people who fritter their lives away in such a fashion. This person wishes to start a live stream, but would also like to have an image display on screen in addition to the camera focused on themselves. Rather the way you do for Ask Away. How would one do such a thing? So it's not your YouTube channel. It's a friend of yours' YouTube channel. It's fairly simple, actually. So yeah, I'm the shot that I'm taking right now, which is of me with my my questions, right? It's fairly simple to do. I'm using an encoder, a broadcast program called XSplit, but a lot of people also use OBS, which is a very similar program, has a lot of the same features. But what you would do is you would have your webcam or your whatever camera you're using to capture your image as a source, and you would have it on one side of the frame. And I'll show you what it looks like without the window here with my my questions. If I can take that out and see, it's the camera. I've sort of trimmed the shot to just be what you see here. So then the other side of the frame is where my my questions sit, and that is just a window capture of a word processor program. In my case, I use LibreOffice, but you could use Word or OpenOffice or whatever you use. and I just capture that window. Window capture is another option when you add a source to your video. Just add window capture and then manipulate it much the same way you would manipulate the camera image, where you sort of crop it in, and for XSplit you crop by, I think it's you grab the edge with your mouse and hold down the Alt key, and yeah, see that, and it does that. And you can crop the image to whatever size you want, and the same thing with the questions, and you just get it until it's arranged however you want it to look. And then when I scroll down for my next question, I'm actually scrolling in the window of the word processor, and it corresponds on screen, and that's how that works. So it's pretty straightforward process, pretty easy. And once you figure out how to do it once, you'll be able to do it, whenever you want. And it's the same basic process if you want to capture like a web page in your web browser. It's the same thing, but in this case, I'm using a word processor to capture the questions, and it's a pretty neat little trick. It's fairly easy, and it gives a good, useful effect. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them for you or for your friend later on. But but for now, I think that's the gist of it. Just capture a window as an additional source and arrange it in your frame however you want it, and there you go. You're off and running. Next question is from General Contact Unit Problem Child, who says, a couple years ago, Tucker Carlson had a progressive historian on his show, but the segment was never aired because the historian, Rutger Bregman, chose to use the opportunity to attack Carlson. We only got to see the segment because one of Carlson's employees leaked it. Suppose you're like a progressive media studies graduate and you take a job as a runner on Carlson's show because you think it'll give them a leg into the industry. How mad at you should other progressives be? I don't know what's the story behind the person who leaked that vid, but thinking about that possibility made me wonder about when working at an organization like Fox News becomes unethical. Like, I assume you wouldn't condemn the people working as janitors at their studio, but most of us can agree Tucker's writers are shit. Where would you personally draw the line? P.S. Christie succeeded in getting that audiobook removed. I have my issues with her, but this is something I'm glad to have helped with. Yes, I saw that actually, and we mentioned it on Wednesday for the Trek Reluctantly screen when Dana and I were on. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. And I did report that video after the stream was over. And apparently a bunch of other people did too, because I saw Christy tweeted about it yesterday that it had been taken down. And for people who don't know what we're talking about, it was someone had posted the complete audio book of the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, one of the most infamous anti-Semitic texts ever written. And somebody had posted the entire audio book of it on YouTube. And Christie had noticed it and said, boy, this shouldn't be here. This is like, if anything qualified as hate speech, it's this. So let's report this and take this down. And it was taken down. So yeah, mission accomplished. Good for Christie and good for you for bringing it to my attention. And thanks to everybody who reported it and got it taken down. Yeah, it's tough to know where to draw the line. You're right. I would not condemn janitors who work at Fox News. I would not condemn anyone who is like a working stiff, who it was, if they had a choice between, taking a menial job at Fox News or, not being able to feed their family. Like, if you need to put food on the table, you need to put food on the table. I'm not going to be that. Obviously, given the option, I would prefer you didn't work there. But if you don't have that option, it's not my place to judge you and be like, you shouldn't have done that. You should have let your kids starve. And yeah, the writers are shit. The producers are, I would say anybody who takes an active role creatively in the show, anybody who does important work that allows that show to be made in the way it is made would be on the shit list. And that could, depending on what their responsibilities are, that could include people like interns, people like runners and assistants and stuff like that. It depends on what their individual responsibilities are. So I'm not really answering the question in a specific way, but I don't know if I really can. It depends on who you're talking about and what their specific responsibility is in the show. But I would say anybody who contributes in a meaningful way, either creatively or production-wise, that enables that show to be made in that way, and to promulgate those opinions and those ideas that Tucker Carlson does, I would say would be on the shit list, you know. But it's tough to draw a sharp line there and say this side is good, this side is bad. Matthew Lordy, hi Steve. Here's a quote from George R.R. Martin. A reader lives 1,000 lives before he dies. A man who never reads lives only one. I'm a gaming enthusiast and personally would paraphrase that quote as a gamer lives 1,000 lives before they die. One who never plays them lives only one. In my opinion, the best video games, or any work of art for that matter, completely immerse you in being another character. From realistic humans like us to fantastic otherworldly beings. Do you resonate with this idea of living vicariously through other characters in fiction, whether in video games, literature, or other media? That's the difference between our real materialistic world and does that the difference between our real materialistic world and fiction starts to blur, or do you find it too difficult to suspend your disbelief to such an extent? I don't find it difficult to suspend my disbelief to that extent. I just think usually I connect with stories in a different way. I completely see what you're saying, and I understand the appeal of that, and that may have been my experience for certain things. I've never been a huge video game player, so I can't really speak very much to that. But certain films or books or, other forms of art that have led me to identify strongly with a character to the point where I do feel like I'm living vicariously through them. That's happened a time or two for me, but that's not my usual mode of attaching to a story. I don't live vicariously through characters so much as I get invested in what happens to them. And I think that's a different thing. I'm not seeing myself as them. I'm not projecting myself into the story or into their fictional world. I'm getting emotionally invested in them, and I'm curious about what happens next. And if they are facing some kind of trial or trying to overcome some obstacle, I am on their side. I want them to succeed. I'm invested in the outcome. It matters to me as a viewer or a reader or what have you, what happens to them, whether they succeed or fail, whether they live or die, whether the person they ask out on a date says yes or no, or whatever the thing is that they're trying to accomplish, whatever situation they're in, I want it to come out okay for them. That's usually how I strongly attach to art, to stories, is in that way. Getting invested in the characters and in their fates, not so much living vicariously through them. And that can, depending on the story, that can also take a lot of suspension of disbelief. So it's not so much a lack of ability or willingness to suspend disbelief. It's just a different mode of operation. That what I just described to you tends to be my mode of operation when I'm reading or watching a movie or what have you, and that's what really gets me involved. I don't tend to live vicariously through characters very often, and I don't look at stories as a means of escape. I do like a lot, like Star Trek in many ways is very escapist. Superhero stories are very escapist. I like a lot of escapist fiction, but I'm not going to it because I desire an escape, or because I'm not someone who gets annoyed when oh my God, they took me out of it. It reminded me too much of real life. I don't usually make that complaint. If it's a good story, I don't care about that. I don't care if it's, if it makes too close of a reference to a real life thing. And I'm like, oh, I come here for an escape. I don't worry about that. That's not what I'm usually there for. So yeah, it's just different modes of operation, I think. Isaiah Taylor. So I just got done watching the Hulu FX documentary Malfunction, the dressing down of Janet Jackson, and I was surprised about how so many people overreacted to a human body part. There was also the idea that Jackson was singled out due to her race and gender for the incident, while Justin Timberlake's career skyrocketed. So Steve, where were you when Janet Jackson had her wardrobe malfunction? What were your thoughts about it? Just asking. I never understood the outrage over it. Well, I did not see it when it happened because it was the Super Bowl halftime show, and I'd put a gun in my mouth before I watched the Super Bowl. But that's a slight exaggeration. But I can't stand football, and I can't stand the Super Bowl, and I have never felt the slightest desire to watch it. I think the last time I watched a Super Bowl was when a friend invited me to a Super Bowl party And that was like back in high school. And I had a good time because I was hanging out with friends and there was food and we were just having a good time. But I mean, I loathe football. I loathe it. And I'm NFL football. I don't know enough about, I don't have strong feelings about soccer, what the rest of the world calls football. I don't have strong feelings about that one way or the other. I don't really care. But American football, gridiron football, I loathe it. I loathe it more than I loathe any other sport. So I did not see the wardrobe malfunction when it happened, but I heard about it right afterwards, and it was the talk of the world the next day. And I thought then, as I think now, that it was ridiculous. That, even if you are super offended by the sight of a boob, even if you're that, fragile, that the sight of a woman's boob is something that makes you go, oh my God, I can't believe that's on television. It was an accident. Like it's called a wardrobe malfunction, not a wardrobe was supposed to happen, right? I mean, it was an accident. So maybe we should just get over it. And also maybe those of us who need to should get over that overreaction to seeing a woman's boob. Maybe that's not that big of a deal. Maybe you should just grow up, right? I don't know. Maybe you should just grow up. Maybe it's not Janet Jackson's problem. Maybe it's your problem. Maybe you're just a fucking baby or a prude or whatever the fuck you are, and you need to either change it or just learn to keep your fucking mouth shut about it and stop bothering other people about it and just be outraged in your house by yourself or with your shitty family who either agree with you or tolerate you, and don't bother the rest of us with it. Yeah, that's how I felt about it back then, and that's how I feel about it now. It was bullshit. I mean, do I think she was probably singled out and was it made a bigger deal because she was black? Still is? Yeah, sure, of course. This is the United States. Of course race was a factor. I'm sure she was treated more harshly because of that. Yes, and the whole thing was ridiculous. I mean, I understand the outrage over it, but I mean, that doesn't mean it makes sense. It's silly. It's ridiculous, and people need to get over it. Russell, time really does fly. I guess it's time for another Q&A. Loving it. So here it goes. Steve, as always, I trust you are well and the room as well. I'm keeping this short and simple. Being vaccinated was my choice. However, I'm concerned with the hatred toward those who wish not to be vaccinated. I'm pro-choice. I'm a pro-choice individual, and while I think it's important to wear masks in public and keep good hygiene, I don't see the need for hating those who refuse to get vaccinated. Now, keep in mind, I'm a person who believes in a woman's right to an abortion, a human right to suicide, especially in terminal cases, and people's right to choose against medical procedures. So, in short, I'm sorry if I offended you. I just want it on the record that I disagree. But as always, I love your Trek reviews. I love talking NYPD Blue, Quantum Leap, and He-Man with you. But I wanted to point this all out. As always, be safe, my friend. Thank you. Well, and thank you. I think the big difference between people who don't want to get vaccinated against COVID and the other instances you described there is that those people in those other situations aren't posing a potential threat to the health of others. If you are choosing to not get vaccinated for COVID, in other words, if it's not like a medical issue where it's unsafe for you to get vaccinated, and it's not a matter of access, like if you were in the situation, as most people in the United States are, and most of the developed world are, if you were in the situation where you can get a vaccine, you would be able to get vaccinated without undue hardship, and you are just choosing not to. That's a very different thing from whether or not someone chooses to have an abortion or whether or not someone chooses, to end their life if they have a terminal disease or whether or not they choose to undergo a particular medical procedure. If you choose to go unvaccinated, you are choosing to be a public health risk, potentially. I mean, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to get it and spread it around to somebody else, but it increases the risk that you will do that. And therefore, it increases the risk not only to yourself, but to everyone else who comes in contact with you. So I think that changes things substantially when we are discussing issues of personal choice. Whether or not you want to hate people who decide to go unvaccinated, I feel like that's a choice for each individual to make. People react to things in different ways. I am unconcerned as to whether people who choose not to get vaccinated are hated or not. I'm more concerned with the threat they pose to public health and with the role they are playing in continuing to prolong this pandemic. Hate them, don't hate them, whatever. I don't care. Just, keep them from doing damage. Like if I don't think it's an act of hatred to say you can't come in here unless you can prove that you've been vaccinated, right? If a concert venue says you can't come to this show unless you have your vaccine card and you can prove to us that you've been vaccinated, that's not an act of hatred against people who are choosing to go unvaccinated. That's a sensible public health policy. And I think, a lot of the unvaccinated by choice people are trying to make it into some sort of civil rights issue and say we're being discriminated against. But they're not being unjustly discriminated against. They're not being discriminated against due to bigotry and prejudice on the basis of something about themselves that they didn't choose and cannot change and has no moral component, right? They're being discriminated against for the purpose of protecting the health of others on the basis of something they have chosen to do that has negative consequences for themselves and for others. So discriminating against the unvaccinated, saying you can't come into certain places, that's not an act of hatred. That's an act of protection for everybody else. That's other people taking it upon themselves to do what the unvaccinated person has refused to do, and that is to do the responsible thing for themselves and for everybody else. So, I mean, I don't know if I don't think it's necessary to hate unvaccinated people, but I will tell you this, they do not get any of my sympathy. If you are able to get vaccinated and you have chosen not to, you know what? Just stay in your fucking house. Because you have no sympathy for me. If someone says, oh, I was going to go to a concert or I wanted to go out to a restaurant with my friend, my family was having a Thanksgiving get together this week, but they wouldn't let me come because I didn't get vaccinated. Well, then get fucking vaccinated. Ding. This isn't so hard. I have no pity for you. If you have chosen not to get vaccinated and now you are experiencing negative social consequences as a result of that, good. That's the way it's supposed to work. You don't like dealing with the social consequences, get vaccinated, dipshit. That's how I feel about it. Anyway, thank you for the question. And I enjoy talking about NYPD Blue and Quantum Leap and such with you too. Some random geek who doesn't understand some folks. Remember the lolicon, pronounced it correctly because you told me what it is because I didn't know about it before. Remember the lolicon advocate bigot I mentioned last month, the Blair White fan. She was happy at the good news that the good boy Kyle Rittenhouse was cleared of all charges. Self-defense wins. Sure, that's what that was. I really say directly to her how wrong she is because that would be... I rarely say directly to her how wrong she is because that would be divisive. And this Discord server is just like a club to hang out with one another and focus on the positives and shared interests and not dwell on the negatives. While I don't agree with everyone, as you know, there are some differences that are more important than others. I personally can't be friends with conservatives or anti-socialists or anti-anarchists. But how can some folks ignore significant terrible views as defending 4chan, fighting for lolicon rights? There are only two genders. Rittenhouse is a good boy, just so you can have good vibes and chat about video games and anime. I have plenty of friends who chat about games and anime with who don't have terrible views. I'm 100% with you. I'm 100% with you. I love baseball. I am not willing to overlook somebody being a prejudiced piece of shit just because I like talking baseball with them. You know what I mean? I love Star Trek. I'm not going to talk Star Trek with people who are bigoted, prejudiced assholes. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not willing to overlook that because, we don't talk about that stuff here. We just talk about Star Trek. Fuck that. So I'm completely with you 100% there. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you should find another Discord where there are fewer shitty people there. You can have your, your good vibes and your chat about video games and anime, and you won't have to put up with the shitty people. But I'm 100% on your side on this. I agree. I don't get how people can overlook those things. I don't think people should be so willing to overlook those things. I think it's detrimental to everybody to do that, to be like, oh, we know how he feels about these things, but we don't talk about it here. We just want to have everybody get along so we can talk about video games. Like, oh. I'm not here for it. I'm not here for it. Joe McClory says, the trials of Kyle and the Arbery murderers have had me wondering if my beliefs of punitive justice not working are too black and white. As the trials were going, I wanted them to go a particular way, not just because justice would be done, but also I felt there was a chance that if all of them were found guilty, that it may discourage behavior like that in the future. Don't get me wrong, I still feel in general that murder is an act seldom carried out by rational actors, and those that are often think they will not be caught. But in these cases, it seemed that the murderers seemed to think they could just get away with it. Do you think that the verdict for the Arbery murderers may do society some good, and Kyle's verdict may do it harm, or in the end that neither will matter? Oh no, I think both will matter. And I do think verdicts like that send a message. And I do think, I mean, look, I am not necessarily in favor of punitive justice in every scenario either. I mean, I do think that restorative justice should be explored and should be the response to a whole constellation of types of criminal offense. But I'm not sure if murder would ever be one of those. I don't know if someone who chooses to murder another person should have the option to be dealt with through restorative justice. I feel like in some cases, retributive justice is the best way to go, and not retributive just categorically. I don't think that, they should be mistreated, or they should have their human rights violated, or they should be subject to cruel and unusual punishment or anything like that. But, maybe it is best for society for some people to just be locked away for a certain number of years, or perhaps even for the rest of their lives, in extreme cases. Not nearly as often as we do it. But should there be a category for that? Will there always be certain types of criminals who need to be dealt with in that way? I think, unfortunately, probably yes. And I think that kind of thing does send a message. I think I think Kyle Rittenhouse getting away with killing those guys sends a message. It sends a message that, that this kind of thing is okay, or at least that it's more okay than maybe we thought it was before, And on the opposite end of the spectrum, the killers of Ahmaud Arbery being convicted of murder, that also sends a message that this thing will not be tolerated and should not be tolerated. And the excuses you gave for it are not acceptable to us and should not be acceptable to people in the future, right? So I think they definitely make a difference. They're not like transformative. Like, I don't think the entire world is going to change on the basis of either of those verdicts. But do they have an effect? Do they have the potential to do either harm or good? Yes, absolutely. I definitely would not say that neither one matters. No, I think they both matter. They both matter. Scott P. One of my favorite things to do when hanging out with friends is watching shows or movies we enjoy together, but one pet peeve of mine that is done frequently by a few of my friends is that they fixate on plot holes relating to lore or constantly bring up things the characters, quote, should have done. Maybe I just have a greater ability to suspend disbelief, but I feel like you limit your ability to enjoy a show when you're constantly battling the story and characters instead of taking in all the other aspects that make a piece of media great, like good acting, dialogue, directing, cinematography, etc. Are my friends too pedantic, or am I just a pretentious snob? Maybe I just value different things when I watch a show or movie. I just feel like it's okay for characters to not always make the most rational decision all the time, or for all lore to be firmly aligned at any given time. If it properly serves dramatic storytelling in a meaningful way. I mean, I couldn't have said it any better myself. I mean, look, I don't know you that well. You may indeed be a pretentious snob. I have no idea. I can't speak to that. But your friends are too pedantic. Yes. Yes, your friends are too pedantic, in my opinion. Now that's just me being judgmental. I mean, your answer to your own question is actually probably the most reasonable and most understanding one, which is similar to the answer I gave to the earlier question about, do I live vicariously through characters or what? You value different things. That's the most understanding answer. That's the most ecumenical way of putting it, is that you value different things, and I tend to approach things the way you seem to. When I am watching a show, like when I'm watching an individual episode of Star Trek, let's say, I could not give less of a fuck about lore, about continuity, about where this fits in, about what implications the events of this episode of Star Trek Discovery have on some episode of Star Trek The Next Generation that was made 30 years ago, or whatever. I do not give a shit about that. If it doesn't match, or if it changes something, or contains some kind of a retcon or whatever, as long as it's a good story, I don't give a shit. Period. And the same thing with with quote unquote plot holes. I don't expect characters to always act rationally. I don't think it's bad writing if a character does something foolish, if a character does something rash, if a character does something ill-considered. I don't think that's bad writing. We don't all do the thing we should do all the time in real life. And even if we did, stories are not real life. It's okay. In fact, it is often quite desirable for a story, for a writer to write in a way that serves the story. That is not necessarily the most realistic thing or the smartest thing for a character to do, or what would happen in real life. That's not the point. Tell the story that you mean to tell in the best way you can tell it. That is for me personally, that is the number one rule of storytelling. That is the number one rule of writing. If you are writing, narrative, if you're writing fiction, or even if you're writing narrative nonfiction, tell the story you mean to tell the best way you can tell it. Your first and primary master is that story. You owe that story before you owe anyone or anything else. Do right by that story first. And, everything else is secondary. It's not that stuff. Sometimes people say they say Steve, you don't care about continuity. You don't care about canon. You don't care about other stuff. I do care about that stuff. But to me, that stuff is all secondary to the story I am watching right now. Or if I'm writing, to the story I'm writing right now. And if that story works, even if it transgresses those other things, I'm fine with that. Because the story I'm looking at right now is the most important thing. But yeah, so, I mean, to me personally, yes, your friends are too pedantic. And I think their pedantry probably keeps them from enjoying stories that they might otherwise enjoy and that you enjoy. But a less judgmental way of saying that is to say not that they're too pedantic, but to just observe that you and your friends value different things and you approach stories in different ways. So there we go. Let's go with that. Eric Allen. All right, Steve. Happy Thanksgiving. I hope yours was enjoyable, however you celebrate it. Speaking of Thanksgiving, let's have a Thanksgiving dinner. Me, you, Dana, some random geek, and 6 characters from the Star Trek universe. We must pick people who would add to a thoughtful, insightful, and respectful conversation over dinner. Who shall we invite? I'm thinking Spock, Jean-Luc Picard, Garrick, Saru, Dr. Phlox, and 7 of 9. It doesn't have to be a character from each series, even though my list ended up that way. And I thought about Q, but he's certainly not respectful. Anyway, I hope you're doing well, my friend, and thank you for all the great content, and thanks to the community for being so much fun. Cheers. Well, I hope you had a good Thanksgiving, too. I had a good one. And this is a good question, actually. What would be my 6 Star Trek characters that I would invite to Thanksgiving alongside you, me, Dana, and some random geek? Let me see. I actually like some of your picks there, Eric. I would also want to invite Garrick and Saru, because honestly, okay, so if we're gonna have, because I know people's mileage may vary. For me, 10 people at a Thanksgiving dinner is pushing it, right? Like when I was growing up, Thanksgiving was 6 people, and to me, that's just about perfect. And And now after various divorces and deaths, it's down to like 3 or 4. And that's even better. I'm just like, oh, this is great. So 10 is kind of pushing it. So if we're going to have 10 people, I need to be inviting people based on who's going to be able to have, you say thoughtful, insightful, respectful conversation. That's all great. I also want interesting conversation because something needs to keep me going for this 10-person Thanksgiving dinner. So I think we would definitely want to have Garrick and Saru there because I think they would both be really good storytellers in different ways. And Saru was always kind of a calming, rational presence, but is also a good storyteller. Garrick, of course, great storyteller. So that's 2. I'd also want Guinan there because not only is she a listener, she's also a great storyteller and has lots of experience to draw from. Who else would be good? Saru, Garrick, Guinan. I want someone from Classic Trek, and not Spock. No, all due respect to Spock, I love Spock, but maybe who on the Enterprise would have the best? Maybe Scotty. That'd be 4. So and then Riker, of course, that'd be 5. I gotta have. I can't not invite Riker to Thanksgiving. Are you fucking kidding me? So Riker would be there. That would be 5. And then 6, maybe. I don't know who would be another good one to invite. Who'd be? And as far as conversation, I don't know. Maybe B'Elanna from Voyager, because she's a little bit of a hothead, and you'd want to have at least one hothead in there to kind of, just in case you need someone to be the straw that stirs the drink. And she could take, somebody could say something that would piss her off, and then it would set everything going. And, I know that kind of throws your respectful conversation requirement out the window, but like I said, I need things to be interesting. So we need to have at least one kind of live wire in there to kick things off. So that's what I would go with. Those would be my 6. And I think that would be quite an interesting, quite an interesting Thanksgiving dinner. The real question would be, what's on the menu with all these characters from all these different alien civilizations? So that was the second to last question. I'll put it this way. That was the last proper question. The actual last question is from John Brockman. And John says, butts? For some reason, first of all, if you like, that's the answer. Butts, if you like. And if the owners of the butts are okay with it, do what makes you happy, brother. It reminds me, just answering it like just asking it like that, just this out of context butts reminds me of Peter Parker's landlord from the Spider-Man movies, Mr. Ditkovich, who's in Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3, and every time Peter walks in the room, he always goes, "Rent?" So, butts, rent. Anyway, you get it. That's it for the pre-submitted questions. And it is now time to turn to the live chat. So let's see how everybody is doing over here in the live chat. Hi, everybody. Hope everybody's had a good time while I have answered other people's questions. And now let's spend some time together, shall we? Yeah, Derogatory Trekkie with B'Elanna. You'd have to have some Klingon stuff. You'd have to have some Klingon food there if B'Elanna was there. Christine Chapel, like the least interesting character on this show. Number 1, maybe because we don't know a whole lot about number 1, and number 1 seems interesting from what little we've gleaned about her from her appearances in Discovery and some of the short treks when the Rebecca Romaine Stamos played her, or Rebecca Romaine, I think it just is now. But anyway, because she's not married to Stamos anymore. She's married to Jerry O'Connell. Jerry Maguire? He's not even real. But anyway, yeah. Dana asks, how did Steve and Stuffy begin? The first Stuffy video was called... It was called Steve and Stuffy Watch Antichrist. And it's like 3 minutes long, and that is literally all that happens in the video. Stuffy is sitting on the couch watching Antichrist. I walk in, sit down next to him, and I say, "What are you doing?" Or "What are you watching?" And he goes, "Antichrist." and we watch one of the more infamous scenes from Antichrist, and I make a little joke about it, and then that's basically the end of it. And it was just something to do. It was just, an idea to be able to have a conversation with another character without having to have like another actor involved. And I really liked it. And, Stuffy had an established personality in my head already, so he made a natural character to sort of be a foil, and it just kind of grew from there. And as I kept making them, we added, various characters based on the stuffed animals that I had or that my now ex-wife had, and it kind of grew from there. So it just started as a way to dramatize a funny conversation and to make a video, and it's obviously more elaborate now, but that's still basically what it is, right? It's still a vehicle for funny stuff, for characters interacting in funny and hopefully interesting ways. Jude 5AD says, is Igor an ableist character, at least the way he tends to be depicted in films? Yeah, probably. Yeah, I would think. I would say any character with any kind of disability, especially, from films from the 30s and 40s, where they're depicted as like this grotesque, horrible thing just because of their physicality. Yeah, I think that's ableist for sure. Super chat from John Burns, who says, Cisco punched Q. Could you see him punching Kosh? I don't think Cisco would be that foolhardy, because Kosh has that encounter suit, so Cisco would know he'd be punching a big piece of plastic or whatever that is, whatever the encounter suits are supposed to be made of. So I don't think Cisco would punch Kosh's helmet. No. Now, if Kosh came out of that and he saw like the angel version of Kosh, like the actual Vorlon, and Kosh had done something to piss off Cisco, absolutely he'd take a swing at Kosh. Super chat from Kemp Chalmers. What about football don't you like? Can I say everything? It's boring. It starts and stops too much. The rules are incredibly complicated, overly complicated, too complicated. I don't like that you can't see anybody's face. I don't like that it requires so much padding. If a sport is that dangerous that you need to wear that much padding in order to play it even somewhat safely, maybe you just shouldn't do it. What else? I don't like how violent it is. I don't like how it glorifies violence and encourages violence for other people, I don't like that when the season starts, it's like everywhere. You can't get away from it. I don't like how it seems to accentuate tribalism in its fans, even more so than other sports do. I mean, sports do that just innately. That's something you can't really avoid. But something about NFL football seems to, and college football as well, seems to just really ramp that up in people. There's like football fans are so much more tribalistic than other sports fans, in my experience. So there's all kinds of stuff I just absolutely loathe it. I loathe it as an actual sport. I loathe the mechanics of the game and the experience of watching it. And I loathe its position and its meaning within our culture. I despise everything about it. Super chat from John Burns, who says, Dunbar's number concerns the number of stable relationships per person. Might this be why larger societies can appear cruel through lack of concern? Maybe. Yeah, but that's also why things like government are important, because you can have an institution that, even if individuals might lack concern for the plight of others, there is an institution in place that is empowered and given the responsibility to make sure that everybody is, at least theoretically, this isn't how it actually works most of the time, but at least theoretically be able to make sure that people are cared for. I think that's why one reason why that sort of thing is important. But to answer your question, is it why societies can appear cruel through lack of concern? Yeah, I think that is part of it for sure. And there's a two-part question from John Burns. Once again, thank you for the super chats, my friend. First part is, I was looking at some photos and something clicked. It was of an RPG video game with antlers mounted on wooden walls. Before the Age of Exploration, the largest empire in the world was created by the Mongols, who used temporary shelters. If you were Charles Nelson Riley, you couldn't mount Chuck Norris's head on a temporary shelter's wall. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's one of the unintended and side effects of having of making society in such a way that you do have permanent residences. You can gather things, including not so nice things like animal trophies and stuff. But it's possible to have that kind of society without doing those things as well, which I think should be the goal. Oh, super chat from Beautifulest One. Thank you so much, my friend. Good to hear from you. It says, hey, Steve, just sending my appreciation for your art, humor, and integrity. Loved the Steve and Stuffy special. Looking forward to seeing more. Continued joy. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. I saw you left a comment when I posted the image for it, and you were like, I can't wait. So I'm glad that you watched it and that you enjoyed it. I think the Stuffy and Friends Turkey Day special came out really good too. I love those riff videos, and I thought that was a nice way to sort of do a new Stuffy video without actually starting the new season yet, because as I mentioned, Dana and I are still writing what will eventually be a full season of Stuffy and Friends video that will be like the full official return of the characters and a new series for them. But I thought doing a riff video with Stuffy and Jack would be a nice way to sort of bridge that gap. So I'm glad you liked it. I'm glad people who watched it seem to have enjoyed it and think it turned out good. And also just got a new member. Thank you, Buckazoid, for becoming a member. I don't even know if you're watching or not, but thank you for becoming a member. Serena Geek, I have not really watched rugby. No, I might have caught a little bit of it, but obviously it didn't capture my interest. This was the one I was looking for. I'm scrolling back to find some stuff. Dorota Trekkie says, can you say Mixie's name backwards? Of course, Kill Tipsy's him. It's not a trick. I've just heard it pronounced enough times in various productions that I know what it sounds like. Kill Tipsy's him. Chief Dancing Ostrich. Steve, do I truly annoy you? I don't think so. Have I said that you annoy me? I don't think you annoy me. I don't remember you annoying me in the past. If I have, if you have, I have forgotten about it. So you can't be that annoying. Oh, Seal 0626. This is a good one. Can you imagine Cisco reacting to Riker's attempts at cooking? Oh man, that would be good. That would be good. Actually, oh man, that's a great idea for one of my Star Trek comics. I should use that at some point where Cisco and Riker have like a cook-off. And of course, my version of Riker is, a delusional shithead. So he would think that he's like a much better chef than actual chef Captain Cisco, and they could have like a cook-off or something. That might be an idea. But so hopefully I can imagine it if I end up trying to write that comic. Thanks for the idea. Jude 5AD says, I'd have voted the other way, but Wisconsin's laws are so ludicrous that I think the verdict is legally defensible. What would you do if you wanted to vote guilty but felt the law didn't allow it? Vote guilty. And sleep like a goddamn baby that night. Gerald Tretrecki says, a journalist tweeted about a leaked Snyder Cut trailer and said Whedon Cut was better. Snyder said, watch Saturday morning cartoons. I get he was angry, but that reaction was childish. So Snyder said, watch Saturday morning cartoons? Well, I mean, I would rather watch Saturday morning cartoons than watch Zack Snyder's version of the Justice League. Saturday morning cartoons are better than Zack Snyder's version of the Justice League. So there you go. Thanks for the suggestion, Zach. I'd be happy to. Jamie J asks, have you tried Be Gay, Do Crime? If not, when do you plan to start? I mean, I'm not gay, so I don't plan to start being gay. I don't think I've never done like a serious crime. So I have no plans to start either one, but we'll see how it goes. Ben Puffer says, I always assumed crew members on a starship earned credits they can then use for the replicator. Like you might need to save up to replicate something special. That was something that I don't, other than on Voyager, which was supposed to have special issues, with like energy conservation. I don't think that's ever been established in Star Trek, except for that special situation. But in, I think, Trekonomics, one of the books that I did a video about a couple years ago about the economics of Star Trek, I think Trekonomics is the one that speculates that even though the Federation doesn't use currency as we understand it, that they would almost certainly need to have some kind of system like that, not just on the starship, but just overall, where there would be sort of energy credits, where everybody gets a certain baseline amount that, you need to live on and to have a good quality of life. But you can save up energy credits in order for special things, like if you want to get a boat or build like a big house or, buy a starship or whatever, or like if you serve on a starship, you want something special from a replicator that you don't really need, that isn't one of your necessities, but that you just would like to have. You save up your credits and then you can spend them on that. I think that, like I said, other than in Voyager, which was a special situation, I don't think it's ever been explicitly established that they have such a system, but I think it's a reasonable assumption that they would, if you imagine it as though it were a real place. I mean, that kind of thing doesn't seem unreasonable. Super chat from Ken Blankenship. What is your opinion on jury nullification given the current circumstances? I mean, it's one of those things where, like, if it gets you the result you want, then it's tempting to say, yeah, no problem with that. Like a judge should have the power to set aside a verdict if it's, if the jury obviously comes to the wrong verdict. But I don't know. I mean, if we have a trial by jury system, we need to be prepared for the eventuality that juries will return verdicts that that will not please us, that may even be unjust and the wrong verdict, and will free the guilty and convict the innocent. Like we need to be prepared for that, because the same thing would happen if we had everything was just a bench trial, right? I mean, like no system would be perfect in that regard. I feel like jury, it's kind of like executive pardons. I'm not a big fan of executive pardons either. Like, I don't really think in general they're good things, and they're easy things to abuse. But I'm not quite sure that I would want to just completely get rid of them. And I'm not quite sure I would want to completely remove the possibility of setting a jury verdict aside in special circumstances. But I mean, like, it's, like I said, it's tough, and it's tough to think about without like a biased perspective, Dorota Trekkie asks, are you still watching the Arrowverse shows? If so, what is your favorite episode? I'm not watching any of them actively right now. Now that Supergirl has ended, I was still watching Supergirl regularly, but it wrapped up a couple weeks ago. Actually, I wrote a video about Supergirl that I'm going to shoot over the weekend. That'll be my Wednesday video next week, sort of a retrospective about the Supergirl series. But no, I'm not watching The Flash or Legends of Tomorrow right now. I've never seen Stargirl. None of the other ones I haven't. I'm not actively watching anything right now. When Superman and Lois comes back, I'll definitely be into that big time. But no, I'm not really watching it actively right now. Which is not a knock on the Arrowverse. I mean, I think I'm on the record saying I really like the Arrowverse, but I'm just not, I'm not having. That's not a part of my regular watching schedule right now. That other Ted, this is a good one. Thoughts on Cowboy Bebop. So I did watch the new Cowboy Bebop this week, the live action version on Netflix. Overall, I thought it was all right. I didn't love it. I didn't think it was great, but I certainly didn't think it was bad. And a lot of the really, really negative comments I've seen about it seem to be coming from people who are big fans of the original and are just upset that it lacks something from the original that they thought it should have had. And look, I love the original Cowboy Bebop. I'm not even a big anime fan. Like, I would not consider myself, generally speaking, an anime fan. Not that I have anything against it. It just doesn't generally draw my interest. But Cowboy Bebop is genius. I mean, the original Cowboy Bebop was one of my favorite things. Like, it's fantastic. It's just fucking good. And the new version is not nearly that good. Um, it is not anywhere close to the level of the original, but it's not bad. And there are parts of it, I think it takes it a while to get going. I started to finally really get into it around episode 6, and then it lost me a little bit as it got closer to the end. The ending wasn't super satisfying to me, but it wasn't terrible. Like, it was very sort of, oh, this is pretty good, I guess. And pretty good, I guess, can be a big letdown if you're expecting it to be as good as the original. But judged on its own merit, it's okay. It's fine. John Cho is great as Spike. John Cho is probably about as good as anybody ever could be as a live action Spike. And Danielle Pineda is really good as Faye. Mustafa Shakir is really good as Jet. Like, the cast is terrific. I like the look of it. I like the tone. The jokes, for the most part, work really well. It's fine. It's good. It's not an all-time classic, but it's pretty good. $255 AD says, are you aware European soccer teams often have unofficial fan gangs that fight each other on the street when the teams play? You think U.S. football is tribal? Oh, no, I'm aware of that. I'm not. Yeah, I mean, I guess I was speaking just in terms of an American context, because I'm not as immediately familiar with football culture in the rest of the world, like what we call soccer. So, I mean, I will take your word for it if you tell me that soccer is even more tribal than American football. But American football is still pretty goddamn tribal. But I'll take your word for it. Oh, bye, Dana. Dana's going bye-byes. Hope your leg feels better. Jamie J, I do have particular ways I enjoy my coffee and tea, but they're they're the least interesting ways. I like my coffee black and I like my tea with nothing in it. Occasionally, occasionally, I might have some tea with honey. Not regularly, but every once in a while, I might add some honey to my tea. But coffee, I always drink black. It's black as night. As black as a black hole. Let's see. Dr. Trekkie says, so apparently there are 2 new corona variants out there, the B11529 and one in England. Why is it so hard to do the smart thing and say, let's go back to lockdown? Because going back to lockdown for a long enough period of time for it to actually make a difference, which is really what we should have done to begin with, will cost a lot of money that certain people in the government do not want to pay. We could afford it. We could, here in the United States, and I would imagine in throughout the European Union as well, we could afford to just pay people to stay home for a month. You know what I mean? Like, the government could just send people checks and say, just stay home for a month, quarantine, let's wait this out. Like, we could afford to do, it would be expensive. It would cost a shit ton of money, but we could afford to do that. We go to war whenever we want. Like we can afford to pay people to stay home for a month or two to interrupt the pandemic. We have just chosen not to do it. And you know, and that is incredibly frustrating. But I feel like it's a matter of choice, you know, not because we can't do it. We're choosing not to. Sereno Geek asks, is there any other sport that I just loathe? I don't think there's another one that I feel as strongly about. No. I mean, there are other sports that I don't really like super enjoy. But I don't know if there's another sport that I actively where I think like that is a blight on society and it should not exist in any form. You know, I mean, other than like stuff like, you know, pit fighting and dog fighting and cockfighting and stuff like that, you know, but in terms of like reasonably respectable, legitimate sports, yeah, there's nothing about, there's no equivalent to football that I can think of off the top of my head. Yeah, Madeline, yeah, golf. I mean, I'm not like angry about golf, but I don't enjoy golf at all. Like I wouldn't watch golf if you paid me to watch golf. It's it's not remotely interesting to me in any way. And I'm not super impressed by golfers either. Like I'm not saying I could do it. Like I'm not saying I could play golf at a high professional level. Of course I couldn't. But that doesn't mean that it's that impressive. Like it's like I'm you know, like are golfers athletes? Are they really? You know, oh, I'll tell you another one, auto racing. You know, like I'm not as mad about it as I am football, but I'm not a fan of auto racing. I don't get the appeal. It's not my thing, like remotely. I don't watch it. I wouldn't watch it. I'm not interested in watching it. Yeah, Ben, NASCAR. I said that before I saw that, but yeah, NASCAR would be one. Yeah, like I said, I don't hate it, but it's not, you know. David C. Drake asks, why are the ultra wealthy such utterly awful people? Do you think it's largely just the way extreme levels of power affect the brain? I mean, I think that's probably a lot of it. Yeah, I think it's if you get used to getting your own way, if you become accustomed to to being able to live a consequence-free life, I think that can have a very bad effect on you as a person. Like if you get used to, you know, I can do whatever I want and it doesn't matter what happens and it doesn't matter what effect I have on people. I'll still be able to do whatever I want. I don't think that's a good, like that's a very, that's a recipe for turning into a terrible person, you know, because you're basically educated by life that you don't need to consider other people. It doesn't matter. You can be nice to people or you can be mean to people. It's the same for you either way. So you might as well just do whatever you want. And sometimes that'll mean being nice to people. And sometimes that'll mean being horrible to people. But either way, it's going to work out for you. Like that's not a recipe for empathy. And it doesn't automatically, there are some rich people that are perfectly fine people that aren't, I mean, not every rich person is an awful monster. But there are quite a few that are, and I think part of it is that you get into a mode where it's the same for you either way, whether you're good to people or bad to people. So if you need to be bad to people in order to get something you want, why the fuck not? You know? Some random geek says, other than baseball, I love baseball too. What other sport do you love? I don't really love another sport as much as I love baseball, but I like basketball. I watch basketball sometimes. I like tennis. I don't watch tennis as much as I used to, but when I was a teenager, especially, I was like super into tennis for a few years. During the Olympics, I like a lot of Olympic sports. Like I couldn't care less about swimming most of the time, but if it's in the Olympics, I'll watch swimming all night. You know, same thing for like gymnastics and ice skating and stuff like if it's the Olympics, I'm glued to the TV. Track and field, I couldn't care less about track and field any other time. But if it's the Olympics, I'm like, fuck yeah, I'm right there. What's another one? Oh, it's hockey, ice hockey. Yeah. I mean, I can watch an NHL game. Like, I'm not like opposed to hockey. I can get into a hockey game if there's one on and if there's nothing else to do and I watch a hockey game. But if, especially in the Olympic hockey, I'm just like, again, I'm right there. Kemp Chalmers says, what type of cockfighting? The kind where cocks fight. Like, what other kind is there? I've got my, I whip out my cock. You whip out your cock. Our cocks do battle. And it's the last cock standing is the victor. What kind of cockfighting do you think I'm talking about? John Burns with a super chat says, response on CONCACAF limiting matches that can be attended by fans in Mexico City due to their fans yelling homophobic slurs, or Ask Away 99 question. Look, I don't have a problem with venues imposing limits on fans attending their event. Like if fans yelling homophobic slurs has become a problem and the team or the venue decides to impose limitations to try and curtail that, I think they have every right to do that. I don't have a problem with that at all. Like it should be up to the team or up to the venue. Like if I own a theater and a bunch of people have been coming in recently and disrupting shows and yelling stuff at the performers and yelling, racist stuff or homophobic stuff or whatever, I feel like I, as the owner of the theater, have the right to say, hey, okay, fuck you. You're not coming back. You're not coming back. You're not coming back. And if I can come up with some kind of broadly pitched rule that will cut down on that sort of thing, something within reason, I should have the right to impose that, to improve the experience for everybody else who isn't there for that shit. Some random geek says, isn't that kind of cockfighting just sword fighting? No, because it's not with swords. It's with cocks. It's with cocks. Yeah, or the governing body. Yeah, same thing. Same principle. Same principle, John. Thank you for another super chat. Yeah, the governing body, the venue, the team, whatever. Like, I in principle, I'm not opposed to that. 255 AD asks, would Viagra be a performance-enhancing drug in cockfights? Well, that would depend on how the cock in question responded to the Viagra, I suppose. But I guess it could be, yeah. It all depends. Every cock is different. Every cock responds differently to a given stimuli, and perhaps it would be a performance-enhancing drug, but perhaps not. Not. Every cock is different. Oh my God, Madeline, the record for planking is 9 hours. That's, wow. That's impressive. Here's a member message from Kirok 2011. Says, sorry I'm late, but I feel the need for a Trek question. What are your thoughts on Admiral Nechayev's speech to Picard regarding Hugh as a Starfleet officer? I thought Picard was right. Your opinion? I think Picard was right, but I completely see Nechayev's side of it when she tells Picard, you had the ability to destroy the Borg, and you chose not to do that. You chose to respect Hugh's rights as an individual, and that led you to not take the chance of destroying the Borg, who are an existential threat to every species they encounter. Specifically, the Federation is her primary concern because she's an admiral in Starfleet and she's part of the Federation. But the Borg are an existential threat to every society that they come in contact with. And Picard had the chance to eliminate that threat, and he chose not to do it. So I think Picard was still on firm moral ground there. I understand why Picard did what he did. I think Picard did the noble thing. And that is a common message throughout Star Trek, that sometimes the needs of the few are more important than the needs of the many, or at least that the needs of the few or the one do warrant consideration before the needs of the many. That's a recurring theme throughout Star Trek, that sometimes there are situations where that is the right thing to do. As Picard himself says in another episode, I refuse to allow such questions to be decided by arithmetic. But I totally see Nechayev's side of it. And if I had her job and I was in her position and I had her responsibilities, I might even feel the same way that she feels. You know? John Burns with another super chat says, I guess you never saw the cockfight RE movie SOB. I guess not, because I don't know what you're talking about. And yeah, Madeline, I agree with you. I think Cisco probably, yeah, especially after Wolf 359, I think Cisco would have destroyed the Borg and would have slept like a baby. Would have been like, yeah, send him back. Yeah, send him back. Send him back with like the spatial, analysis virus thing. Destroy the Borg. Yeah, please do it. Why have you not done it yet? That would be Cisco for sure. Derogatory says, Booster Gold, awesome character. A friend made me watch The Greatest Story Never Told. Are there more awesome Booster Gold episodes where he is confused with Green Arrow? I don't know, actually. Someone else might have to answer that for you. I remember that episode, but I am not like an encyclopedia for the Justice League cartoon. I don't have nearly as good of a recall on that as I do like Batman the Animated Series. But yeah, Booster Gold is a great character. He's a terrific character. Just that character type, I think, is a great thing to have around. 255AD says, what about the cameraman on Tucker's show? Like people who are the more technical aspects of making it so his show can exist. I think they're definitely more culpable than than like a member of the maintenance staff. I think I would be more pissed at the cameraman than I would be at the janitor, but I would be less pissed at the cameraman than I would be at the producer. I think to a lot of people, in the industry, if you can get like it's a job, and that doesn't absolve them of any moral responsibility. I think it will be easy for the cameraman to say, look, I don't care what he's saying. It's just a job. You are still helping to make that show. I do feel like there is some responsibility on your part. Like if a job opportunity comes up somewhere else where you can go get a job and run the camera for a show that isn't hastening the coming of fascism, maybe you should do that instead. I don't think your hands are clean, certainly not. But not as bad as, Carlson himself or one of the producers or writers on the show or something like that. I do think a cameraman or someone in that sort of position does have a degree of culpability. Yeah. Super chat from Kevin Blankenship, who says Wolf 359 was an inside job. So I've heard. And I like someone pointing out that is actually technically true. Like, it's being said on the show by the conspiracy theorist guy, but it's actually it's accurate. It was an inside job. Yeah, the other Ted, antimatter can't melt uranium beams. And like, can't it? I feel like it can though, can't it? Derogatory says, I just started watching Discovery Season 3. I'm on episode 5. It's awesome. Is it just me, or are they giving Michael more time to be comedic? I remember season 3 having more of a lighter tone, so I think I would probably go along with that. I don't have enough of a specific memory of it. I've only watched it once, and it's been over a year since I watched it, so I don't know exactly. But season 3 did have a slightly, a lighter touch in terms of the characters, and Michael did have. I think was it the first episode of season 3 where she had that sort of that drunk sequence that she got to play where she was affected by the gas and she got to play drunk. Basically, she wasn't literally playing drunk, but that's basically what she was doing. And she was real. That was terrific. That was a really good comedic performance. So I think you're probably not imagining it. John Burns with a super chat. The Arbery murderers, and I'd rather refer to them by a mod's name and not their own. Their credibility was destroyed by video evidence. Yeah, I agree with you. And I was very pleased and somewhat relieved that they were convicted. 255 AD says, I get that it's mostly capital interests, but do you think the resistance to more lockdowns has anything to do with people thinking, Jesus, how many more times? Oh, yes. Oh, I think that's definitely part of it. I think there is definitely like pandemic fatigue. I think there is a very strong desire in the minds of a lot of people to just have things go back to normal. And even if things are not back to normal, even if it's not safe, just let us think it is. You know, there's a yearning to just be done with this. And even if we're not actually done with this, can we all just pretend we're done with it? Like, I do feel like that's part of it. Yeah, for sure. Random Geek, yes, the patron show is this Sunday. Yes, the patrons and members hangout is this Sunday at 12 Eastern time. And I'll be posting about that in the on Patreon and in the members section here on YouTube over the weekend. Yes, it is this Sunday. Thank you for the reminder. I was going to mention it at the end of the show anyway, but thanks for giving me a chance to bring it up now. Dorota Trekkie says, talking about Superman, why do people say they have difficulties relating to the Man of Steel, even if he is all powerful? Deep down, he's raised by humans. Where's the problem? Well, if he's written properly, there is no problem. And if you are investing in him on a human level, and if the story is enabling you to invest in him on a human level, then you're completely right. There is no problem. There is no problem at all. Because, yeah, he was raised by humans. And not only that, I mean, just because he can fly and bullets bounce off of him and he's incredibly strong and heat vision comes out of his eyes, and all, just because he has superpowers, he still has most of the same concerns and problems that ordinary humans have. You know, he still wants to make the world a better, safer place for the people he loves. He still has emotions. He still has successes and failures. He still has to face his own limitations. Now, those limitations may be a lot further out than, you know, typical humans' limitations are, but they are still there. And his responsibilities that he carries are much heavier than most ordinary humans are as well. So, I mean, if he's written properly, if he's written to be human, just with different abilities, then there's no problem in either writing him or in reading him or experiencing him and investing in him as a character in a way that's relatable. It's all down to, you know, failure of imagination on the part of either the writers or certain people in the audience who say I can't relate to Superman. John Brockman, you are right. The problem is humans are dicks. That is the explanation for so much that is wrong with our society. Some random guy says, given that Starro was the monster in Suicide Squad, is there a chance Mr. Mixie Pitlick will have a cinematic debut? I would love to see Mixie in a movie. I don't know if the people making DC movies would see Mixie as a viable movie villain. I think he easily could be. I don't think there's any reason why you couldn't write a Superman movie, for instance, with Mixie as the primary antagonist. So it could happen. There's no creative reason why it couldn't happen, but I don't know if it ever will. I feel like Mixie is probably going to be relegated to being a TV villain, unfortunately. John Brockman asks, is Snyder's Superman actually Superman? Yes, I think he is, but I think it also has to be noted that he is inconsistent in very important ways with every other mainstream version of the character that has ever existed. Barring things like Elseworlds and stuff like that, where Superman was different on purpose to serve some goal in the story or to make some point. The Snyder Superman is the only version of Superman in any medium that I am aware of that was meant to be the quote unquote real Superman, like the mainstream Superman of whatever project that was. Who is like that? Who is that careless? Who is that callous? Who is that lacking in empathy? Who is that indifferent to the suffering of others? Who we see behaving as a savior, as a superhero, as someone who helps people and rescues people so infrequently. Like he is Superman. I don't want to be a gatekeeper and say, well, he's not, no true Superman. I don't want to no true Superman him, but he is definitely an outlier, and is fundamentally different from most, if not all, other versions of the character, and suggests that the people who created him, namely Zack Snyder and David Goyer, have a fundamental antipathy or at least misunderstanding of the basic characteristics of pretty much every other version of Superman we've ever seen. John Burns, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to ignore your non-super chat, so I apologize for that, but he says, you ignored my non-super chat Wolf359 comment above. Next year, shooting triplets with Arnold, Danny DeVito, Tracy Morgan, and Chris Rock. Thoughts? So who are the triplets? Tracy Morgan, Chris Rock, and somebody else, I guess. Twins is not the movie I would have pegged for a for a belated sequel or reboot, but I guess we'll see how it turns out, won't we? And then also a super chat from Kirak 2011 says, just a random funny question about Superman. What is your opinion on Superman in Superman 2 returning to the diner? Wasn't very Superman of him, I think. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that either. I mean, it doesn't ruin it for me. It doesn't take me out of the movie. And Superman doesn't really hurt the guy. He just kind of humiliates him. Just sort of embarrasses him and kind of just gets a little payback. But that's not a really Superman thing to do. If I were writing the movie, I get why they did it, and it was presented in a way so as to be fun, and to be kind of comical. So it doesn't come across as Superman it's not meant to come across as Superman being cruel, or being a bully, but that's kind of what he's doing, So, I mean, I probably would not have included that scene, even though it was presented in such a light way. But yeah, it's not a very Superman thing to do. No, I agree with you. Sci-Fi 2285, they're very much related. I think Henry Cavill could have been a terrific Superman. But I think he played the character that was written for him. So I mean, it is his portrayal, yes, in part, but his portrayal is he's portraying the character as written, and the character is written that way because of Zack Snyder and because of David Goyer. I mean, it's difficult to separate them. I think if he were playing a Superman that was written more like how I tend to think of Superman being, then I see no reason why he couldn't have been a terrific Superman. So I mean, it's not his fault as an actor that he wouldn't be able to play Superman, but he was playing the role that he was cast to play. And I think it's a really, really shitty version of Superman, 5AD, do I think humans will exist in 100 years? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. John Burns says, Peter Jackson, no one could make one Lord of the Rings movie. Zack Snyder, completely insane, challenge accepted. Yeah. Yeah, that's basically what he seems to have decided to do with that Justice League movie, isn't it? I mean, although I will say, I'm convinced that if he had not left the project and he had finished his Justice League the first time, it would not have been a 4-hour movie. I think Zack Snyder's Justice League, the Snyder Cut that they released on HBO Max, was not the movie that he would have made had he not had to leave the project. But when it came time to come back and do the Snyder Cut, yeah, that's totally what he did. That's totally what he did. And I think the fruits of that indicate why that's a terrible idea. Like, it's not just the length that kills the Snyder Cut. The length of the Snyder Cut is a big problem, but it's not just that. There's all kinds of shit wrong with the Snyder Cut. Dorota Trekkie says, oh, first of all, yes, sirree, Bob. Steve is my name. Yes, Steve is my name. Dorota Trekkie says, would Sherlock Holmes beat Batman in terms of crime solving? I mean, that's a good one. I'm trying to think how I would write it. I think I probably would have Holmes defeat Batman as a crime solver, because that's really all Holmes has going for him. Like, Batman is also a great detective, but he can fight and he has gadgets and he does superhero stuff. So, like, Sherlock Holmes isn't a superhero. Sherlock Holmes is just a really fucking good practitioner of deductive reasoning. So, not that Batman is any slouch in that department, but I think I would have Holmes be his superior in that way, because it's like having Superman beat the Flash in a foot race. Like, come on, man, that's all he's got. Like, let him have this one. Yeah, see, and Madeline agrees with me. Not that anyone asked, but Sherlock would absolutely beat Batman in crime solving. Yeah. And Seal 0626, beat or collaborate with. Well, if we were doing it in the classic formula of a crossover, then they would compete initially, but then ultimately they would join forces to defeat a common enemy. So because that's how superhero crossovers always used to happen back in the day, was the two heroes, through some misunderstanding or some contrivance, the two heroes would fight each other, and then in the closing act of the story, if it was like a comic book miniseries, and like in the final issue of the miniseries or whatever, they would join forces. They would put their differences aside, and they would fight the common enemy. So yeah, after it turned out that the Joker and Professor Moriarty had teamed up and were going to destroy the city or whatever the fuck, then Holmes and Batman would team up and they would save the day. That other Ted, do I get sour cream and Shives jokes often? No, I don't. But there was one time when I put my name in to wait for a table at a restaurant, and when it was my turn, the hostess called out Chives instead of Shives. So that happened before, but I don't get sour cream and Shives jokes very often. No, I wish I got them more often. So clever. And yeah, Geralta Trekkie, I agree. The world's finest episode of Supergirl, where Flash appears for the first time, is a really good episode. It's a really good episode. And John Burns says Superman to Badman, not Batman. We should team up. Badman. Why? Yeah, oh God, I love that video. I love that video. You have superpowers. Me, I'm basically just rich and nuts. Yeah. Rich and nuts. It's such a great video. Shut up about your dead parents. Weren't your parents murdered too? I was only a boy. Oh, it's such a great video. Pete Holmes, for people who don't know what we're talking about. Who is Willow asks, what is the best pie? This is a great question. Opinions vary, of course. And depending on my mood, my answer may vary. I really like lemon meringue pie. I really like pumpkin pie. I mean, because it's Thanksgiving, I've got most of a pumpkin pie in the fridge. Really like pecan pie. Oh, fuck yes. I love like apple pie and stuff like that. I think, though, my consistent favorite, the type of pie that I am more likely to take above other kinds of pie, is probably a good berry pie, like a blackberry pie, or maybe like a mixed berry pie where it's like kind of tart berries in there, like blackberries and cranberries, or not cranberries, raspberries. Like, that's good. Like a good tart mixed berry pie is my favorite. Put a scoop of vanilla ice cream on top, or some Cool Whip or something. Oh, fuck yeah. That's good shit. So that's probably my favorite. But I mean, God, I love a good lemon meringue pie. But a good berry pie is probably my favorite. Um, CLO626, how's it 1 in the morning already? I have no idea. It's only 8 o'clock for me. But since you brought it up, it is time for me to wrap up the show. We've been going for 2 hours. You guys have given me such awesome questions. 255 AD, one last thing. 255 AD says, 2 weeks ago, I saw a news story about an anti-vaxxer whose newborn died of COVID, and she says she has no regret. Can you stop the planet and let me off? Only if I can jump off with you, man. Only if I can jump off with you. And derogatory, I don't think I've read that crossover you're talking about. Last super chat from John Burns. He says, have you seen a comic where Batman shows Bruce Wayne how he is a bully? I think that would be fascinating to watch. What do you think? No, I don't. That's the first time I've had that brought up to me. That's an interesting idea. Yeah, that has potential, maybe. Sure. Who is Willow? I make a mixed berry crumb pie with blackberries, raspberries, and blueberries, and it's always a big hit. That sounds like heaven. That sounds like a little slice of heaven. That you are describing an amazing pie. Anyway, that is it for the show. That is it for the questions. Thanks to everybody for watching and for the questions. Don't forget the charity links down below, charitylinks.page. It is a doc that is set up by our friend Some Random Geek. And if you have a few extra bucks and you want to help out some people who need a helping hand, who are in a little bit of distress and could use a few extra bucks, please click on that link in the description and help out some friends of ours. We would all really appreciate it, and so would they. Also, don't forget, if you want to support my work, you can do so by either becoming a member by clicking the join button or by going to patreon.com/Steve Shives and becoming a patron. And you can become a patron for any amount of a pledge per month, either as a patron or as a member. Allows you to ask questions ahead of time for these Ask Away live streams. And also gives you the chance to join us for our once a month hangouts, where members and patrons can join me in a video call and we hang out, and the whole thing is streamed live on YouTube. So anybody can watch, but only people who are members or patrons and get in before I close the room can hang out with me. And we always have a good time with our monthly hangouts. And the monthly hangout for November is this Sunday starting at noon Eastern time. So if you are a patron or a member, look for me posting some reminders about that in the members only and patrons only feeds over the weekend, and we'll do that Sunday at noon. Also, don't forget, in addition to my YouTube stuff, I co-host a couple of podcasts as a part of the Lemmy Listen family of podcasts alongside the brilliant Jason Harding. I am the co-host of Late Seating, the movie review podcast, where we take classic films and decide whether or not they deserve their reputations, whether the reputations are good or bad. Our most recent completed review is of Blade Runner. That went up last week. And the next episode of Late Seating is one I am so excited about. We're recording it this weekend, actually. It'll be up next week, and it'll be our review of one of my favorite movies. Oh, God. The Karate Kid, the original Karate Kid. So I'm looking forward to watching The Karate Kid again this weekend and reviewing it with Jason. And that'll be up next Friday. And of course, I'm also on the Star Trek themed comedy podcast, The Ensign's Log. And it's me and Jason and Dana, who was with us in the chat earlier and has gone off to rest her broken foot. We hope that Dana feels better really soon. And but myself, Dana, and Jason are on the Ensign's Log, where we play low-ranking officers serving aboard a certain Federation starship, captained by a certain bald French guy with an English accent. I think you know who I'm talking about. And we're having a great time making the Ensign's Log. We're well into the season now, and it's been a ton of fun. And so we're recording a new episode of that over the weekend as well. The new episode this week of the Ensign's Log just went up today. So if you have not heard the new episode of the Ensign's Log, or you have not heard Late Seating, or you want to hear any of the other awesome Let Me Listen podcasts, go to letmelistenpodcasts.com or follow the links in the description and listen to the podcasts, because we have a great time making them, and hopefully you all enjoy them when you listen to them. So that's it, everybody. Again, everybody who celebrated Turkey Day yesterday, I hope you had a good one. If you haven't watched the Stuffy and Friends Turkey Day video yet, it's up on my channel. Please go check it out. I think you'll really enjoy it. And yeah, have a good weekend, everybody. I'll see you on Sunday for the patron and members hangout. And I'll see you next week for a bunch of other videos. Until then, take care, and I'll see you. Bye, everybody.